You may recognize me from the virtual event course. I think I was wearing this same jacket. I'm very excited to host my first panel for Billy and the team today. We've got two terrific panelists joining me who I think are going to provide two unique frames of reference on the topics we're talking about. They love a good chat, so I'm going to introduce them to you now. The first is Nigel Collin. Nigel, say good day.
G'day.
Nigel is the founder of the Ingenious Oz project. He's a speaker, facilitator, advisor, and all-round good guy. He's been working as a presenter for over 20 years at both live events and in front of a camera. He's been teaching leaders and presenters how to connect on camera and in live environments for over a decade. He's the founder of the Ingenious Oz project and the author of Game of Inches, where he travels Australia filming and interviewing clever and ingenious Australians and sharing their stories. Welcome, Nigel. Looking forward to having a good chat.
Thanks for having me.
Our other panelist today is a good mate of mine, Ben Alcott. Ben's the director of Damn Good Productions. You can tell because he's got the good lighting and the good sound and the good camera. Ben's been working
I hope so. We had to hire it all in.
Ben's been working in the video production industry since 1988 and he's been producing unique content ever since. His career in television began early. His grandparents owned one of only 2 private zoos in New South Wales, Australia. And so every time a TV program needed a monkey, an emu or a kangaroo, the Alcotts would get a call. Yes. Who wouldn't love a pet monkey?
I was the monkey, Chad.
Oh, I see. Today, Ben's recognised as one of Australia's top creative and technical talents. He's produced literally thousands of events for corporations large and small all around the world, including Qantas, American Express, Ferrari, Disney, Macquarie, BMW, Apple, Nestle, JP Morgan Chase, and many, many others. In television, Ben helped create Freshwater Blue, MTV Network's first Australian commission, and he's directed a number of studio-based shows, including Tonightly with Tom Ballard for the ABC, and he's also worked on a number of other well-known programs, including Q&A, The Set, and Giggle and Hoot. Welcome, Ben.
All lies, by the way. You found the wrong bio. That wasn't me. But that's okay.
So the plan for today, guys, we've only got a handful of you here, so I think we can afford to be a little bit more intimate with this. I'd definitely want to encourage you to ask questions, and you can do so in the chat box as we chat. We're going to get through some key topics that we want to share with you, but then we definitely want to get your input. So that would mean questions, comments, challenge us if you like, ask us some real specific stuff, because that's what Ben and Nigel and I are here for. So with that said, let's get started. So I know that one of the hot topics of 2020 with regards to events going from live to virtual and hybrid was budget. Previous budgets didn't necessarily factor in what was required in order to go and stream. So Ben, let's start with you. From your perspective and frame of reference, what happened to budgets in 2020 for events?
Well, they drove up to a cliff and they hurled themselves off it, is what happened to budgets in 2020. I think it's worth mentioning that in March of 2020, our revenue dropped 91%, which obviously is pretty devastating for a lot of businesses. And I guess to give an idea of the sort of where things were, where things are now, the last big event that we did was for an automotive manufacturer who make very fast red cars. I'll leave it to your imagination. We launched their new vehicle in Australia. The budget for that totaled up just on $1 million. And then after that, they all stopped, and an average budget of a broadcast, like a corporate broadcast, is something around about $10,000. So, you need a lot of corporate broadcasts to make up a $1 million car launch. But at the same time, what we're finding is for our clients is that they're not spending the huge amounts associated with live events. So there's one thing, we obviously do the creative and the production, but the clients also have to pay venue charges, catering charges, physical invitations, transfers. None of that's happening now. So more money can go into the production side, which obviously makes me happy.
Well, Ben, if a client isn't paying $200 a head on catering, why has there been difficulty in just shifting that from column catering to column production?
Look, good question, and I think that's because we're lucky. I've been in production since 1988, as you mentioned, Chad. When I started as a 3-year-old, which was fantastic. Basically, we started doing virtual events, streaming. Our first streaming job was actually in 1998 for Telstra, and we've spent 20 years trying to convince people that virtual, online, everything should at least be part of the mix. And everyone always has been saying, oh, look, yeah, great idea. We love that. We'll get to that. Well, that's in our plan for next year. And suddenly in April, it suddenly became in everyone's plan for right now. And it's an education process, and people just didn't understand it. Everyone understands the concept of going to a hotel, hiring a ballroom, having someone stand on a stage with a screen behind them and doing a presentation, but people didn't understand. And when I say people, I mean senior management. They really struggled with the concept of understanding, well, why would anybody watch a virtual event? Why would anyone be part of a virtual event? It doesn't make sense. So it was really a very, very rapid re-education. And as much as I hate Zoom with a passion, it is largely due to platforms like Zoom that people understand the concept of opening a computer, hitting a button, watching a video feed. And they weren't, a year ago, even now, a year ago, they weren't doing that.
So it's clear that for a virtual or hybrid event, that production, the gear, the men and women in black at the back of the room is essential. But now, Nigel, you obviously spend most of your time in front of the camera. So with budgets being challenged and compromised as they have been, can you talk to us about the importance of the investment in someone like yourself? Let's go back a bit. What do you represent to an event, and how do you convince a client that you're an essential component to budget for?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Because when this COVID thing hit, obviously budgets were decimated, and there was a lot of everyone doing stuff, cheaply, and that just comes back to bite you. So I think to answer that, we kind of need to step one step backwards and go, why are we holding a virtual event or hybrid event or face-to-face event in the first place? Like, what are we trying to get out of it? If people are spending, and again, the budgets are way down, even if it's 100 grand or 50 grand or 500 grand or 10 grand, whatever it is, why are you spending that money? What do you want to get back out of it? And I think it's really important from my perspective, because I work in front of the camera. I do a lot of facilitating and presenting. That's my background. But I also do a lot of coaching and training in that area as well with in-house presenters. And the reason I think people would talk to someone like me is because you're investing the time, the effort, and the money in an event, and you obviously have an outcome that you want to achieve, whether it's changing behaviors or disseminating information, whatever that is. So to answer the question in a long-winded way, I'm purely there to support the event and the client. And whether that's me in front of the camera talking, because, engagement is a really big piece of that puzzle. And I, as you are, Chad, I suppose we are masters of engagement because it's what we do and it's what we've trained as. And, but at other times it might be, to work with in-house presenters to get them up to speed in working in front of a camera, because that's a very different game than working from a live stage. So to answer it, I think it's about listening from my perspective. Like, yes, you need a good MC, and an MC is vital, especially in a virtual and hybrid event, because as opposed to a live event, your crossovers are tighter. Time is much more streamlined, if you like. It's, in a live situation, you can kind of tap dance on the stage for 10 seconds if someone's late coming on, but you don't have that in virtual. So you need someone who's got the professionalism to understand the mechanism of broadcast and also the mechanism of live in order to deliver that value. So, it is about value. It's about, what do you want to get out of your event? and what's the best way to achieve that. And it may be through a virtual MC, tying it all together, or it may be working with an organization's, CEO or chair, for example, to help them deliver their presentation. But I'm always conscious of what are we trying to get out of this. And I think often when budgets are tight, we forget that, right? We fall back to how the hell are we going to do this for that little amount of money? And we forget to kind of get innovative and clever about stay in focus with what we're trying to get out of the event. So I don't know if I answered your question directly, but it's kind of where my head's at, I guess.
I think it's all about the journey that the three of us have been on for the last year or two in particular. So what I've noted when I've been...
Can I interrupt you just for 1 sec?
Sure.
Just before I forget with what Nigel just said some very important things there. Firstly, there are two ways of doing this. You can either do it the cheap way or the right way. All right. So I think that's really important for everyone on board listening at the moment and taking part. As Nigel said, if you want to do an event, you've got to ask yourself, why are you doing it? So sure, you can do a Zoom call and you can do that, and there's a place for that, and that's fantastic. But if you're doing an event and you actually want a result from the event, as Nigel said, if you're investing money and investing, whether it's an internal event or an external event, you can just hope that your in-house presenters will talk fine or whatever else, or you can do it properly, and that involves getting someone, Chad, like you, engaging with the audience like we did for the awards, or you get Nigel in, and Nigel in what he does offers a lot more than just being an MC. You're a creative consultant, really, Nigel, aren't you?
Well, so I grew up in events, right? I was a creative director for many years, and it's just I wanted to be honest about it, I wanted to be an actor when I was really young, and my acting coach at acting school said, I will always be competent, but I'll never be excellent. Well, no, it's kind of the best thing she should have, but I learned very quickly I was good live. I was always good at theatre sports. I was always good as a presenter, and I always have loved the creative side of things. And just to jump in, because I know you were going to finish up, I think what's really important from where the three of us are coming from, it's about connection. It's about engaging an audience, because it doesn't matter how much you spend on a virtual or hybrid event. If you cannot connect with your audience, even in a live room, if you're doing a hybrid, it's all for nothing. So you've got to find the best way of connecting. So Ben, back to you.
Well,
and I think what you said there, sorry,
I wanted to put you both on the spot, because the three of us can theorize about this and share war stories, but I want our participants today to walk away with something practical that they can go to their bosses and team leaders and give them a compelling argument as to why they need the investment. So I know from where I sit in the event food chain that there's quite a large gap in the knowledge and the expectation. In the last 5 minutes, you both just filled it in perfectly. But, and not all events are top tier $100,000 events. Sometimes there's an accounting firm or a farmer.
Few of them are.
That's right. And their budgets by nature are smaller. Yeah. And so they've got to count every single penny. And so when there's a spike in production or a spike in or a need for a trained TV MC, there's some stuff there that a decision maker may not have ever heard before. So could you give our viewers today some practical tips, maybe one or two things that they could literally use as part of their arsenal when approaching their decision makers? Let's start with you, Nigel.
Oh, excellent. It's a really, really good question. So let's look at it. So it's about, what are you trying to achieve? It's about, you have to connect with your audience, and then obviously you've got to do that.
Yeah.
Here's what I reckon. And there's two things I think is you need to, in a budget perspective, I honestly believe you need to relook at your line items. And one of the items now that is pretty much it's almost becoming a hygiene factor, in that if you don't have it, you're in trouble, is coaching your in-house and executive team on how to work a camera. Because it's a very different game than presenting through the lens of a web, of a computer. Now, the sell for that is difficult many times, because you don't want to rock up to a C-suite and go, you guys don't know what you're doing as far as presenting goes, because most executives or in-house presenters have been trained really well on the art of presenting in a live environment. So it's a slight tweak over to camera. So to help get that line item through, my advice is always, you've got a set of really good presenters who know how to engage the room, because you, as an organization, you've probably spent a bit of money on them. And what we need to do is just slightly coach you on transferring that into camera. Because if you don't connect on a camera, you're going to disengage your audience and they're not going to get the message. So that's how I approach clients pretty much, because it's true. There's a lot of really good in-house presenters out there, be they C-suite or experts in content or whatever that might be, your marketing people, for example, are really good presenters in a live environment, but very few have been taught the art of working a camera. And
I think that's quite compelling, Nigel, in that if we talk maybe in terms of things that they understand, in things like return on investment. I mean, you use those catchphrases and say, if we don't invest in this training, then we're not going to get the return. The return being absorption and interpretation of the key message.
Yeah, to be bombastic about it, it's almost the opportunity cost.
Sure.
And then obviously the other side of that is, if we can engage our people better, because let's face it, people are watching, I don't know how many webinars, how many Zoom calls we're on, how many virtual conferences we're attending at the moment, but it's a lot. So you've got to stand out. So if you learn to do that properly, if you just get nurtured and coached on how to work the lens of a camera, you're actually going to get better engagement, and that will improve your ROI. So it's kind of the plus and minus of that argument.
Ben, from your perspective?
Well, the first thing is just to finish off on what Nigel was saying, the number of times being all of the times that we get approached to do a job and everyone says, oh, it's fine, we've got people in-house that'll host it. Now, that is the massive ringing alarm bell extravaganza for us, where I go running, screaming from the room because, no, it'll be fine. And the ones where the in-house people do host it, and I'm talking online events, which have got any complexity to them, it always ends up being a massive disaster. So I really have to endorse everyone that's watching, including Metricon. It's really, really important that if you think about doing these live events, you have someone emceeing it for you, and not for any other reason that, I'm talking to you with an earpiece, right? How many people out there are used to having conversations with noise going directly into their ear and people talking to them and all that sort of stuff? So that's that's really important. So I really, really echo what Nigel's saying there. When it comes to pitching virtual events or convincing management to go across to virtual events, the first thing we always say to them is, what do you do when you go home? When you go home and want to be entertained, what do you do? Do you open your computer up and sit there and watch little squares of people staring back at you? Or do you turn the television on? And if you turn the television on, what do you watch? Well, you watch Game of Thrones, you watch stuff that's entertaining, right? You don't sit there and stare at little squares of people staring back at you. So human beings like being entertained. They like being, we talk about education through entertainment. So they like doing stuff that's interesting. So all you have to do is when you're planning a virtual event, do something that's interesting, do something that you'd like to be part of, do something that is remotely fun. Sure, you got to get the message across, but do it in an interesting way. It doesn't have to be, okay, and now we've got an hour and a half of someone on Zoom talking to you, and then we're going to go another hour and a half of someone talking to you. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah.
In terms of a content planning thing?
Yeah. Ben, let me put you on the spot and push you one bit further. Let's say I'm the executive, I'm the director, I've been in my job for 50 years. We've been running Zoom meetings for 12 months. You're my internal event leader, event team manager, and you've been tasked with doing the kickoff conference for January, February this year. You approach me with a well thought through budget that allocates time and money for Nigel, really good job delivering production, and you pitch it to me, and me, the director, I say, well, we've been using Zoom for 12 months. Why can't we use that? What's the first thing you say in response to that? That doesn't involve swearing.
I was going to say the first response is, you're an idiot. would be my first response. But I'll use a real world example. Okay, so we've got a kickoff conference coming up in a couple of weeks. They normally, a big American company who shall remain nameless, they normally fly their executives all around the world and fly people to America, and it ends up being their travel budget is over $1 million, right? So they're flying people everywhere. Now they obviously can't do that at the moment. So what they're doing is they've got a large presence in Japan. They've got their US team, they've got their European team, and we are managing the 2-day event out of Sydney, out of our studios here. And what we've managed to get them, how we've excited them about it is it's a multi-channel thing. We've got an English channel, we've got a Japanese channel, we've got an Indian channel and so forth being discussed. And we're making them realize that actually what they can do is something that they can't really easily do live, which is be delivering content to all these different groups simultaneously, tailored to the individual groups. There's real-time Q&A in different languages that's being translated. We're getting them all the different offices are doing videos and submitting them to us, and we're then editing them and putting them up online as little breakers between the segments and so forth. So there are things that you can do online that engage people, that make it much more cost effective than doing a live event. Not necessarily saying more effective, because yeah, it's great to get everyone together and they all network and they're all together, but you're not immediately, we're cutting over $1 million out of the budget line item because they're not flying. So why not do a well thought out, well planned?
Yeah, that's perfect, Ben. And I think the take home for all of us there is, firstly, we're making television with a streaming an interactive component. But then what Ben presented to us in what he just responded with is that rather than talk about all the extra cameras that he needs, what he's talking about is the extra value that investment is going to give us. Those things like the Indian channel and the commercial breaks and the spot entertainment are all presenting, up till now, unused channels and unused platforms. So if we present it, our justification in terms of value and return on investment, then that's quite compelling. Yes, so Ben, Nigel, I approve both of your budgets.
And you know what I find interesting? You know what, even though I called you an idiot. So Chad, you know what I find interesting, just to your point there, is for 12 months, not a single client has asked us about the technology and how many cameras we're using and why is this vision switcher worth this and whatever else. In live events, we're constantly justifying, what does this black box do that costs $35? We want to cut that from the budget. Not one client has said to us, oh, well, how many cameras are you using? They don't care. All they care is about the outcome and about the delivery. And you know full well, when we work together, you know, all we care about is, well, how are you going to see the audience? How are they going to hear you? This, that, and the other. The client just wants to know what it costs at the top line. It's not like a live event where they go through and they talk about, well, what's the brightness of the projector and why is that costing us $2,500? And that's not a discussion anymore, which I find really interesting.
That's brilliant. So long story short, present the return in words that they will understand, rather than talking tech and the theory of it all. That's good. I hope you guys took something out of that. Now, don't forget that you're very welcome to open up the chat window and ask some questions of Ben and Nigel today as well.
Can I just jump in, because I've had a thought?
Yeah. Oh yes, have a think.
Shut me down if it's not a relevant thought. But listening through all that, it's really interesting. It doesn't matter how many cameras we've got, because it's what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it and how that's actually put together. You need to leave to experts like Ben, because they know what they're doing, right? But for me to pull off a really good virtual or hybrid event, I just, in my head, I had a Venn diagram pop up with 3 circles. And one of those is content. So it's really, and content is not just from an holistic point of view of what are we trying to achieve in this particular event, but it's also the content piece within each presentation and how they're linked, which incorporates all of that interaction and entertainment. How do we actually construct that so that we have, you know, we used to do, in the entertainment business, we used to have like energy graphs where we could go through a 20-minute presentation and plot the energy of the audience and what the turning points needed to be, for example, which is pretty complex. The other one of the Venn diagram is delivery. And obviously that's one of my things is how do you make sure that your presenters or you've got an MC, or however that is, how do we make sure we deliver it in a way that people engage and are connected? And there's a number of different devices to do that. And the third circle is technical. And that's obviously where people like Ben come in, because it is important to have the right technical support and the right equipment. For example, auto cue is one of my key loves and hates at the same time. And I actually now travel with my own auto cue. Because there's so many times you rock up at an event and there isn't one, and people are reading a screen off the side of the camera, and it just takes your eyeballs off. And so the technical aspect is also important. But again, I think with each of those circles, there are people who can help you with that and do it well and do it in line with what your value proposition is.
Excellent.
Hope you recorded that.
Nigel, it's just worth mentioning very quickly.
Go ahead, Ben.
It's worth mentioning very quickly, Nigel, that I now, when I go on dates, I actually take an auto cue with me, and I actually read off that, and I'm like, "Hello, you're looking beautiful this evening. I like your hair." So I find it's easier. It's an easier way to go on dates now.
So you've produced first dates, is that right? So they've all got auto cues. Oh, that's brilliant.
No. Anyway,
So,
but just chat really quickly, just on that. On that note, one of our clients that you all would know is Disney, and I used to travel to America and do a lot of Disney work. And the thing I love about Disney is they only care about the outcome. They don't care about how it's delivered. They don't care about what you need. They don't care about that. It is not a discussion. They only care about the outcome, and it has to be world class, has to be creative, it has to be delivered in different channels. We were doing one job we were doing was for, I don't know if you guys watch Say Yes to the Dress on TV, but it was for that group. We were launching a Disney bridal gowns and so forth, and we had it set up. We were delivering it to the screens at Times Square. We were streaming to 20 million people. And they don't ask. They just say, this is the outcome you've got to achieve, and it's got to be the best. And I think that is ultimately everyone's dream, because all you want to do is, and for all of you as event organisers, you want to do events that engage people and that everyone talks about. That's the point of doing events, right? That you want everyone to talk about your events. So
that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, look at it from the outcome back, and everything should serve the outcome. Well put.
Yep.
So we've had a year almost. Can you believe it's almost been a year of webinars and Zoom this and online, virtual, hybrid that. What do you think the sentiment is out in the market at the moment? Are clients and audiences over virtual events? Is there an opening now and an increasing in importance in putting on hybrid events? And what are the issues that are coming up with terms of things like selling tickets and finding sponsors? Ben, what's your take on that?
Well, firstly, let's be clear on what an online event is, an in real life event, and what a virtual event is, right? So, because there's people are using lots and lots of different terminology for that. So a hybrid event can be it doesn't have to be a live event that is then streamed, right? So let's be clear about that. And I'll actually point to Billy at the moment. And can I talk about these series of events coming up? Yep. Okay. So Billy has very smartly come to us and has got a great idea, which is staging 3 events simultaneously in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. 3 events with 3 sets of speakers at each event. Right? 3 live or audiences at each event. They're breakfasts, or are they lunches now, Billy? I think they're breakfasts. And basically, each audience has their own experience. Their panel, there's a panel there, there's an MC there. It's a live event. But also, we have got an MC in a studio, and what they then do is then link between each of those 3. So, okay, we're going to start off with John Smith in Sydney. John Smith does his presentation, now crossing to Dave over in Brisbane. So the people in Sydney have their live presenters, but then they watch the screen and they see the presenter coming out of Brisbane, and so forth, and on it goes. And then there is a virtual audience for those people who can't attend or who aren't comfortable in traveling or who are outside of those centres. So that is a hybrid event. It's not just we're doing a live event and we're streaming it, but it's actually an event that's written in such a way as you've got live content in multiple locations. You've then got people engaging remotely, remote Q&A, remote, we're crossing videos and so forth, and then you can buy a virtual ticket. So that I think, and Chad and Nigel, correct me if you think differently, but I think that's what we're finding is for every live event we're being booked for going into this year, should any of them happen, every single person is saying, we're going to do, there will definitely be a virtual component. And the reason why is because people aren't scared of it anymore. They've seen it work. They've seen us dial in people remotely. They've seen it happens. So why not? Whereas before there was this big wall of, oh, it's all too hard. You have to use satellite. You have to use, fiber cables. Now it's like, well, we just make a Skype call and we can get them into the event. So I think just to your question of our audience getting over virtual events, what we found is live events died. Zoom calls for a couple of weeks while people just worked out what the hell was going on. And then the bigger clients demanded more. They were like, and I'm talking the banks and the financials, they were like, Zoom calls aren't cutting it. We need to be more professional. So then virtual events kick in, and that's great, and everyone embraced them. And then towards the end of the year, everyone was like, oh, well, we've done some great virtual events, but 2021, we're going back to live events. And so all these live events got booked, and then suddenly they've all been cancelled. So we actually, and Nigel, I don't know if you're seeing this as well, but right now, we don't really know what's happening because we've got a bunch of virtual events booked. All of our live events have suddenly been postponed through to June onwards. So we're waiting to see what happens again. Will they go back to accepting purely virtual events or what's going to happen? So that was a drawn out answer, but I hope it made sense.
Well, from my perspective, I'm in the same boat. Nigel, when you've been getting inquiries or when you've been talking with existing clients, what are the hesitations and the red flags, as I like to use, that they're bringing up to you that is a bit of a barrier to them deciding to move ahead with a hybrid or virtual event?
Yeah. Look, obviously people I think I agree with what Ben said, that it will be a component of events in one shape or form moving into the future. And I personally am really excited about that. It's really interesting. We did some research when this first happened, well, around, not first time, but May, June. And what came back from a presenting speaker kind of point of view from clients was they understood, a lot of people are waving the flags, goes, okay, we can present virtually, and rather the question wasn't, can it be done? Because we know it can. Ben and I were talking with you, Chad, earlier about, broadcast events have been going on for 30, 40 years. I remember doing them in big game shows and modeling stuff on the Tonight Show format years ago, right? So it's what we're doing isn't actually that new. So the concern isn't, from what I see with my clients, the concern isn't so much, can it be done? It's, will it be done well? How can you guarantee me that my message is going to get through? How do I know that the MC I'm booking can actually connect on a camera? Yes, they've worked 30 years on a stage. Can they work a camera? Can they do both? So that's the first thing. And I think that comes down to a client confidence piece. And that is probably not the issue it was 6 months ago, because we now have runs on the board and we've got proof of life that, we can do this well, right? And this course is a testament to that. The other thing, though, which I think is going to rear its head as we move in, and I agree, the uncertainty is just the transition into hybrid as we move forward is, I think, one, very exciting because there's so many possibilities about how we can do it. But there's also, doing a 100% online event is a little bit simpler than doing a hybrid, because you've got an audience and you've got a lot, and so it's the broadcast factor. And sure, again, we know we can pull it off. There's no problems in doing that, but it's that comfort level. And I think the more we do it, the better it's going to become. And it comes back to what we said earlier, in that there are experts in fields out there working in this industry who are, one, learning extraordinarily quickly. If you look at the innovations that have taken place in the last 9 months, it's uncanny. So it's not a question for me, and what I'm hearing from my clients, it's not a question of can you, it's a question of how well can we pull this off. And the answer is, well, if we plot it right, really well,
Yeah.
And again, that comes to back to that value proposition, I think. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think we have.
I think we'll let the audience. We'll go to the audience.
Okay, so I want us to reflect back, the three of us to reflect back on the last 12 months and share, I guess you could call it a verbal case study on a success story on how all these things that we've been talking about have been tied together and delivered well. So, in terms of sales, audience engagement, and general success ROI. Ben, do you want to tell us a good success story from last year?
A good story? A good story as opposed to a bad disaster story.
I'm gonna get to that.
Well, we don't have any disasters.
All right.
Just to Nigel's point just before that, we're finding that clients went through a learning curve. They now know what doesn't work, and now they're a bit gun shy of doing Zoom calls where people can't log in and they can't hear and they can't see and the cameras don't work. So they've tried that. So it is now quite literally, okay, we want to do it well, but we have to make sure it works, because they've tried doing it themselves and it didn't. So we're finding there is that learning curve. We've always had the clients. American Express used to hire us to set up satellite links to America. We've always had clients who will do it properly, but now we're finding the clients that have been doing it for a number of months now want to do it. We want to have, Japan coming in, then we want to cross to Germany, then we want to cross to the UK. So people are pushing the boundaries now, which is great.
That's good.
And I'm really happy about that.
Because you're a bit more confident.
So I guess, well, and not just that, but they're realizing that they can't just live doing Zoom calls their whole lives. I mean, like, the businesses have to progress. It's a bit like everyone just sitting in an empty conference room with white walls around a table. They did that in 1921, but the corporate AV, corporate production market, corporate theatre, I think we call it, Nigel. The corporate theatre market progressed to the point where it was getting very sophisticated because it had to be. And everyone can't just go back into sitting in a white room around a table anymore. So, you've got to push the boundaries. Case studies of things that we're doing, at the end of last year, we were doing 4 events a day. I guess there's quite a few case studies to choose from. One that worked well, I'll use this as an example, and these actually are people who completed the course. So, all of you out there can aspire these dizzy heights. It was a fragrance launch for a large French-based fragrance company, and they had done a global thing and they had to do it in Australia. And the original brief was, we're going to do it on Teams. And I'm like, well, yes, if you want me to poke my eyes out with a hot stick, yes, we can do it on Teams, but there is a better way to do it. And there's about 18 million better ways of doing it. So what they ended up doing, much to their credit, they ended up doing a day of the product launch. There was and this is a really good example of getting engagement. We limited it to 20 influencers per session, and there were 8 sessions in the day. They came on, logged in for their session, got their tickets were emailed out and so forth, all the sessions booked out, which was great. And then every influencer had a pack sent to them in advance. And in that pack was obviously the fragrance. We did a tea matching, a Japanese tea ceremony. They got the teas, and they then had a dessert that was created by a celebrity chef that had the elements that was in the fragrance. And then we did presentations. We had an influencer MC in Sydney. We had the client in Melbourne. We had videos that were supplied by corporate in France. And then at the end of the webcast, we then did a Zoom-like, not Zoom, but Zoom-like event where we did the tea matching with a Japanese tea master, and everyone did the ceremony and so forth. And the feedback on that was absolutely fantastic. It had all the different elements. It had, and the corporate people, their heads fell off because they were like, brilliant. We've been doing it via Teams overseas.
Well,
so
I think
it's about getting all the different elements in.
Yeah, and obviously being creative. I'm just keeping an eye on time because I want to get some questions from our audience today. Nigel, can you give us a quick example of a success story from last year?
I want to come at it from a different angle if I can, just about the devices or the elements of a couple of them. Look, I think at the end of the day, people just want to be part of a conversation, to engage people. They just want to be heard and they just want to contribute. And one of the dangers of virtual is just talking at people. right, which we kind of discussed earlier. So a couple that I've seen are really good. AFA did a virtual conference, which was really slick in its production. That's important. But what was really interesting, and I was emceeing, and it was one of the first times I experienced that we could gather information or the feeling and sense from the audience as we were going. So often in a live environment, you have to wait to the end of a session to hear what people are saying, right? And yes, you've got your apps or whatever. But in a virtual environment, there's a chat window and there's things going. So as an MC, you can be standing on stage with, as Ben, as you've got an ear, and the producer can say to you, hey, people are really chatting about this point. And so you can tailor almost spontaneously the content to be really pertinent. And I find that extraordinarily exciting about this world.
That's brilliant.
Another case in point was probably the best I've seen so far was the CPA World Congress. They normally do a series of live events around the world. They did one virtual one. And it was seamless. It was amazing. And I think the reason for that is in preparation. Right, the auto cue was spot on, but they had someone there to train people up on how it works. There was enough rehearsal time. The scripting was spot on, right? The briefing, the training of people who didn't quite know how to work a camera was there. It was a huge amount of pre-production effort, and what that meant was an engaging and slick presentation. And a third one, just on that interaction, and Ben, you're going to hate me for this, but recently did a series with Atlassian, and it was great because we had 10 or 12 people on each session, and we repeated it 8 times around the globe. We did it on Zoom. And what it meant
Jesus, Nigel.
I know. But rather than a talking head at people, it became like we are having a conversation, and people were engaged. People were learning from each other. And when we can open up that two-way conversation or multi-way conversation, which virtual and hybrid allow us to do in so many more ways, I find that extraordinarily exciting.
I think that is a brilliant and possibly the most important point for today. And that is that engagement and interaction and making your event a two-way conversation is essential. The quick example I want to use is the awards that I did for Billy, and working with Ben as well. So I was in a little shoebox DJing in front of a small camera.
Hey, trying to give away too much of our secrets, Chad, please.
So I was performing for all of you.
A large studio.
In a massive studio with a green screen and air conditioning and drinks and all sorts of snacks. And I've DJ'd for a number of virtual events now, and I almost insist that I have to have some way of communicating with the audience. If that could be me doing shout outs or having access to the chat window. But for all of your events, you have to find a way to have your audience engage and interact with you, if possible, in real time. So my absolute favorite moment, and I've been banging on about this, Billy, since the event happened, was that the audience was very much up for it. It was all of you guys for the awards nights. And I said, people, send me a request. And I knew everyone was just going to ask for The Horses by Daryl Braithwaite, which is just always, no matter what, ask a request, play me Horses. So I said, okay, if I'm going to play it, I'm going to make you sing it. But I had everyone sing it in the chat box. And so everyone was just copy pasting the chorus into the chat box. And that was just this moment that I actually thought, this is really simple. There's no fancy tech involved. It's just me typing away while I'm furiously DJing. So think of...
Dude, there's heaps of fancy tech involved. Don't be like, oh, this is really simple.
Sorry.
Give me a break. No, it was really, really basic. For you, it was.
Okay, let me reframe that. The tech was so elegantly and sophisticated put together that it looked like it wasn't there.
Seamless.
Long story short, pick something, anything, where you can gauge sentiment or get input in real time from your audience, because then they'll know that they're being valued and that they're a part of the show. Now, I really want to hear from you guys. If you've got any questions, you can pop it into the chat, but at the same time, because there's only a few of you, you're welcome to unmute and ask a question. So let's throw it open to you guys. Who wants to be first? Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, Nigel.
Just a quick one because I maybe missed the first 10 minutes and I heard somewhere along the line difference between live and virtual.
Yeah, as in what is the difference between the
Yeah,
two?
can somebody just explain that? Because
Sure.
I missed
Ben, do you
that.
want to Ben, do you want to take that?
I'm good at this one. So obviously a live event is a standard in real life event where you turn up to it and you do your business. That's what we refer to as a live event, as in not it happens live or it's pre-recorded. But when we talk about a live event, we're talking about one where people turn up and do the event. And obviously a virtual event is one where they don't turn up and they are at home or in a remote location. Now, whether that's via Zoom or Blue Jeans or television or whatever, it's just something where the people are joining remotely. So does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, I might have got that even further wrong then. So I'll just call that a face-to-face event, but live. And then there was talking about virtual and hybrid. So the hybrid's a combination of both. But in terms of streaming, we're looking at running a hybrid event where we'll have a number of things happening in the area which we want to broadcast, but but they may not all be broadcast live as in real time.
Okay. Definitely, I get what you're saying. So the way that we do that, and we literally, we finished one of those about 10 minutes before I joined this Zoom call where we were doing it for the Scottish government. We produced this virtual tour of Scotland. Everyone logs in, they watch, they're chatting and everything. And what we do is we have a live beginning and a live end where the hosts are, they're all in America, but we join them all together via green screen and whatever else. So they are live, and then it rolls into a pre-recorded clip that the audience thinks is live, but it's actually what we call a play out. So they're live, play out, live at the end. So what we would do with your event is you always have a live MC. You always have someone who can respond to the audience chat. It's like, hey, great to see you, Steve. Thanks for joining us. And we've got John coming in from Melbourne. So the audience needs all of that. And then it's going to be, and now we've got Stephen, and he's interviewing the CEO from America, Jerry. Stephen, over to you. And then we play out the pre-recorded component. And it looks live as far as the audience is concerned, but it's pre-recorded. So there's absolutely no problem with mixing all of that. When we do it, we've got special hard drives and things that play it out. You can do it with Zoom. It's much clunkier, but yeah, you do the live bits in the virtual event, and then you have the pre-recorded bits. So definitely can do that.
Nigel, we used to years ago do fake live crosses for all of this. So we used to actually get, and I remember doing
crossing it.
Yeah, with some of the cricketers, they were in England doing something, and we'd actually film one of them and ask them questions, and then we'd play that video as if it was a live cross. And you got to have an MC who knows how to time it right, but never did an audience member ever suspect we pre-recorded the interview. And radio stations do it all the time, so why not do it in events?
Nigel, I think the takeaway from this is that we need to rethink how we think about an event, in that we're now making television. So what Ben and Nigel have said is that basically the tenets of how we make TV. So that should rework how we approach events. Think of it as making TV.
And just
and my advice to.
Sorry. Just one other thing is, what is there a time frame, like a maximum time frame that you can hold and run a hybrid event? Because ours is going to be around tourism type things, and we're going to have experiences during the day where they can see something and go off and be part of something virtually, and then bring them back to some discussions and stuff. Like the physical event might run for a day, but can you keep people tuned and coming in throughout a day on a virtual event? That just unrealistic.
Great question. Can I jump in, guys?
Yes, go right ahead.
Anyway, a couple of things on that, Nige. With the CPA Congress, what they did, it was over 3 days, and it was pretty much a full day. However, the actual plenary sessions, if you like, were always around the 2 hour mark, because they figured people will sit and watch Netflix, or they'll watch, a movie, and 2 hours is a pretty reasonable time. And in that, make sure you've got 3 or 4 subsets to keep it interesting. And after that 2 hours, it then went on to a pre-recorded platform, so you could watch at your own level or catch up with work. So they kept the sessions within that framework, which is really cool. I remember when I first started working in this industry, a guy called Glenn Lehman said to me, every 45 minutes, you've got to do something different, right? That is now about 20 and probably even less. Neuroscience tells us that we lose concentration at around 22-minute mark. So that, to me, is a good pivot point, not pivot as in innovation pivot, but attacking, do something different. And within that 20 odd minutes, I reckon you've got 3 shorter sessions. So you've really got to plan it to keep your audience on their toes. And that might be, by the way, just pausing and having a Q&A session. Or, as Chad has mentioned and Ben has mentioned, there's a lot of really good interactive platforms out there, or chat windows or whatever it is. But personally, if it's longer than 2 hours, warning bells. And I think you need to that's why TED Talks are around 17, 18 minutes, by the way. It's just a good time.
I know, for instance, I've been engaged quite a bit to be the commercial break in the day, where in one spot I'll be DJing and taking requests, and in another one I'll be running my interactive trivia quiz. They're literally just commercial breaks to take your mind out of the deep content and literally being light about stuff. Ben,
something you got to keep. Sorry, so just to finish off with what Nigel's question was, something you've got to keep in mind as well. This session today is a classic example. Everyone's sitting there with their videos off. With the people that were on video, we lost 2 of them at some point to go and do something. Now, look, that's all absolutely fine. If you're at home watching TV, it's not like going to the movies or going to a conference where you are locked in a room and have to watch it beginning to end. You are competing with kids crying, I'm hungry, I want to have lunch, I have to go and have a pee, I've got a work call. So the reality that we find is we try and use platforms that offer them different things to do. So when we did the AMI Awards, you could come in, you could network, you could look at some expo things, there were breakout sessions. You've got to plan your event, and especially if it's tourism based, make sure that you list your schedule very clearly. I might be interested in one session, but I might not be interested in another. So I'll come back at 11:45 because I'm really interested in this session, but I'm not going to stay watching all day. So just make sure that people know what's going on, a bit like a television station. You know what time Judge Judy starts, which of course is 11:30 on Channel 10, but that's a whole different story.
Well, you might.
Well, yes, I do, because I like Judge Judy, but that's a whole different story. But you make it manageable so that people can choose what they want to do, because you are absolutely not going to get people for a whole day, because people don't do that. Yeah.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left now. So I want to go to Nigel and Ben one more time. Nigel, give me one short sentence for what our team today can take away and act on.
It's all about connecting. End of story. If you can connect with your audience, your message will get through, you'll get the behavioral shift you want. And in order to do that, you've got to understand what you need to achieve. But at the end of the day, if you don't connect, it's all for nothing. So it's all about connection.
Excellent. Ben, your sentence?
And following on from that, I would say no limitations. Don't go into a project thinking what I can't do, or I've only got a camera, and I say, focus on the creative first, focus on the content. Content is king, always has been, always will be. Focus on your content and then work out how to achieve it. There's always a way of doing whatever it is you want to do. Content is king. Make it interesting, make it engaging, and then work out how to do it. Not the other way around.
Excellent. So my short sentence would be lean on your experts. Nigel, Ben, myself, for the things that we're all very good at. Don't be afraid to ask us questions all the time, and consider your talent carefully. That could be me DJing or someone doing a comedy bit. That's vital, because as Nigel said, we've got to break an hour and a half into 45-minute blocks that have been broken up into 20-minute brain sessions that have then been broken up into 5 to 6 minute chunks. In between all of those, and there needs to be a commercial break. So that's my 10 cents.
Or make sure your in-house talent has been trained properly.
Yeah.
I mean, just make sure that they're good on camera. You don't have to have aerialists and elephants dancing in the background. Just make sure they're engaging speakers, that they know how to look at a camera. I mean, just that little bit of media training.
Excellent. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for spending an hour with us today. We're contactable via Billy if you like. You can reach out to us individually if you want to ask us more questions or get some more advice, or better yet, engage us for a job. Look forward to seeing you.
No jobs.
No. Thank you so much, Billy, for having me host, and thank you to Ben and Nigel for being on the panel today.
Thanks for having us.
And I echo that. If anyone wants to contact me directly, very easy to find, very happy to answer any questions. Just drop me an email. More than happy to respond.